New York is oft seen through its glowing towers, sleepless avenues, and a rhythm of life that makes the whole world look up. But beneath that dazzling surface, another city is quietly alive. A dark, damp, tangled world under the concrete, where millions of sewer rats have turned tunnels, drains, and subway stations into their own hidden kingdom. They are not simply hiding in the shadows. They chew through electrical wires, damage underground systems, dig into the foundations of buildings, and carry dangerous diseases closer and closer to residential neighborhoods. For years, humans have poured money into traps, poison, smart technology, and every kind of control campaign imaginable. Yet the rat population kept rising like an army that refused to be defeated. Then something strange began to happen. In some of the areas that had once been overrun by rats, security cameras started capturing their unusual disappearance. There was no new poison campaign, no AI trap system operating there, and yet the rats were clearly declining, as if some invisible force was erasing them night after night. And when researchers finally stopped looking down at the ground, they began to realize the clue was above them. Over the skies of New York, an ancient group of hunters was silently returning. So what exactly had made the rat empire beneath the city begin to tremble? To understand why that disappearance was so disturbing, we first have to look at the true scale of the rat empire beneath New York. In 2023, researchers estimated that around 3 million Norway rats were living under the city's concrete. That means for every 3 New Yorkers, there was one rat hiding somewhere in the sewers, subway stations, dark alleys, or behind the old walls of the city. These rats did not appear overnight. They arrived in the New World on European merchant ships back in the 17th century. For more than 300 years, they learned how to live alongside humans, using garbage, darkness, sewer systems, and every crack in the city to build an almost perfect survival network. What makes them a nightmare is not just their ability to hide, but their terrifying reproductive speed. From a single pair, if there is enough food and space, their population can explode into thousands within just 1 year. And when the COVID-19 pandemic forced restaurants to close and food waste suddenly disappeared, the rats did not collapse. Instead, they became more aggressive, fighting each other, eating one another, and flooding into residential areas in search of food. They chewed through car wiring, created fire risks, dug into building foundations, and carried more than 35 dangerous pathogens. New York spent tens of millions of dollars on smart trash containers, toxic gas, dry ice, AI traps, rat birth control, and even a special position created just to control this animal. But after all of that, the rat population still refused to surrender. If you were the one making the decision, would you keep pouring tens of millions of dollars into rat control technology? Or would you allow nature to bring the predators back on its own? I really want to know your answer, so leave your thoughts in the comments below. The truth began to surface when ecologists reviewed the data from areas in Upper Manhattan where rat numbers had dropped in an unusual way. At first, they thought the cause might be weather, temperature, chemicals, or some other shift in the urban environment. But after weeks of comparing the numbers, none of those factors truly matched the strange decline they were seeing. Finally, one researcher decided to step away from the spreadsheets and go directly to the site. As dusk settled over the city, he climbed onto the roof of a parking garage, watched the streets below, and looked up at the surrounding high-rises. That was when he saw them perched on the water tank of a building, a pair of peregrine falcons standing still like ghosts of the sky. They were not birds simply passing through during migration. They had claimed this place as a permanent territory. And when the research team placed the falcon nesting map over the map of rat complaints, a stunning pattern appeared. In the areas where the sky was controlled by peregrine falcons, signs of rats on the ground dropped sharply. And the most terrifying part was that their hunting schedule almost perfectly matched the moment rats left their hiding places. As the city began to darken, the rats crawled out of the sewers, crossing train tracks, sidewalks, and open concrete spaces. At that exact time, high above them, the peregrine falcons began to dive like living arrows, turning the sky over New York into a battlefield the rats never realized they had entered. The fatal weakness of New York's rats lies in the very way they evolved. For hundreds of years beneath the city, they learned to fear threats that came from the ground. Human footsteps, barking dogs, stalking cats, shadows moving through alleys, all of these became part of their natural warning system. But the peregrine falcon does not attack at eye level. It comes from the sky, almost without warning. Once it locks onto a target, it folds its wings and drops straight down at more than 320 kilometers per hour. The strike happens so fast that the rat barely has time to understand what is happening before it is taken down. Even more frightening, the falcon does not rely on speed alone. Many birds of prey can see ultraviolet light. As rats move through the city, they leave tiny trails of urine behind to mark their territory. To human eyes, the pavement is just dark concrete. But from high above, through the eyes of a predator, those traces can appear like glowing lines leading directly toward the prey. And when these hunters returned, the rats began to change their behavior. They crossed open spaces less often, stayed longer in protected areas, spent less time searching for food, and lost the steady rhythm of reproduction they once depended on. A species that had ruled the underground of New York suddenly found itself trapped in a war its instincts had never been built to survive. But the surviving rats quickly found a way to adapt. They began coming out later, waiting until around 2 a.m. when the peregrine falcons had stopped hunting and the city had sunk deep into darkness. They believed the blackness of night would become their safest shield. But at that very hour, another predator was waking up. The great horned owl began moving through the residential areas near Central Park and Prospect Park. Its wings produced almost no sound, leaving rats that depended on their hearing with no chance to detect the danger falling from above. And when morning arrived, the red-tailed hawks took over the sky. They hunted around construction sites, scrapyards, and sewer openings. Without planning it, New York had formed a three-layered trap: red-tailed hawks during the day, peregrine falcons at dusk, and great horned owls from midnight until dawn. The strange part is that no one actually created this army of predators to fight the rats. They returned because of changes that began decades earlier, when DDT was banned and conservation programs started bringing birds of prey back into America's skies. New York was once seen as a lifeless concrete jungle, but for peregrine falcons, great horned owls, and red-tailed hawks, the high-rise buildings became something very different. They were like natural cliffs, places where these predators could nest, watch, and hunt. While humans spent tens of millions of dollars on traps, chemicals, and technology, the answer may have been flying above their heads all along. Sometimes to heal an ecosystem, humans do not need to control more. They need to step back and allow nature to restore its own balance. If you found this story interesting, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next video. See you again in another strange story from the natural world.